This week's episode is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free, which is a big plus. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more, just like our podcast. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. We've been using this and we love it. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Within Zionism here with Ozzy Fine and Moshe Schwartzberg. Today we have a special guest, Sharona Halickman. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's right. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you.
In this episode, we're going to be just having a quick conversation with Sharona. I was lucky to meet her online, and she has an amazing story, so let's get into it.
Yeah, so before we begin, Sharona, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm originally from Riverdale, New York. I made aliyah with my family in 2004. We came really at the height of the Intifada. It wasn't the most popular time to come to Israel, but it worked out well for our family. When I made aliyah, I started an organization called Torat Reva Yerushalayim in memory of my grandmother. And the idea was to bring Torah study classes to people in Israel that did not have the opportunity to study Torah. Because what happens is, you have all these students and teenagers that come to Israel on T.R.Y and on year programs and on yeshiva and seminary programs, but yet there are a lot of Israelis that live in Israel that don't have access to Torah study. So my mission was really to bring the spirituality that you find in many of these communities into the Israeli community for the adult learning populations that can't get out to a formal study class.
Okay, so we're going to get into that program in a minute, but first we want to hear more about you. So first of all, one thing we always ask all of our guests is, how would you define Zionism? This is a question we always love to ask, and we love to put people on the spot with this to really see, with no preparation, how would you define Zionism on the spot right now?
Okay, so for me, Zionism is the love of Zion, which is Jerusalem. My parents actually named me Sharona Bat Zion. I was born right after the 1973 war, so you'll know, if you do the math, you'll know how old I am. I don't think they ever dreamed that I'd end up making aliyah. They themselves are extremely big Zionists, but I don't think they ever really thought that somebody would make aliyah. So it's just ironic that the one called Bat Zion is the one that ended up making aliyah. And my connection to the land of Israel is through the biblical importance of the land. And for years before we made aliyah, I was teaching a class in Riverdale. I was the madrichat at the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, and I was teaching a class called The Biblical Importance of Israel, where we would go through the entire Tanakh, and we would find every time Israel is mentioned and the importance of the land there. And the more you read the Tanakh, the more you understand why every Jewish person needs to be in Israel. It's not just because of the modern idea of Zionism from Herzl, but it's really from the first word of the Torah, you already see that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people.
Okay, so just to translate for our international community, you said Madricha Ruchanit, right?
Madricha Ruchanit, we called it in English, religious mentor.
You said that your grandparents or was it your parents, were very Zionist and they named you Bat Zion. So what made you actually make Aliyah?
Okay, so both myself and my husband come from very strong Zionist families. We came here as kids on vacation. My grandmothers were members of Amit and Emunah and Hadassah, and they were always raising money for Israel, and we grew up with that in the home. My husband and I both came when we were 17. We came to study in Israel for the year at modern Orthodox Zionist institutions. And we actually met at the beginning of the year, and we went out almost every day the whole year. And we always said, one day, we're going to come back and we're going to move to Israel. But then, of course, you go back to yeshiva universities during college, you get busy, you get jobs when you get out of school. And then it's hard to make that step back. But after we had our second child, it was a little bit after 9/11, it was during the second Intifada, we saw that the prices in Riverdale of the houses were going up. And we said, you know what, we could actually, if we could get what we're our asking price on the house, we would actually have enough money to be able to make aliyah, to fulfill the dream that we always talked about of moving to Israel. So we ended up saying, we'll put it on the market and we'll see what happens. And my husband went on a pilot trip. He had 60 meetings in Israel in less than a week and a half. He met with everybody from places of employment to places to live. And he ended up finding a great apartment. And so we had our house on the market. And once we saw that we had people interested in buying the house, we bought the apartment in Israel. I didn't see it actually until I moved here. But we had it really all set up. And thank God, because the prices were low during the Intifada and the prices were at the peak in New York, we were able to sell high and buy low and have enough money to own an apartment in Israel and bring our family over. And my son was going into kindergarten, which was really the perfect time to come because it gives you a year to learn all the Hebrew before you get to first grade. Because in Israel, first grade is very serious. If you don't know how to say doghouse and birdcage, you're already behind. So it was good that we had that year. He was actually in the Steinsaltz Gan, Rav Steinsaltz, who just passed away last week. He founded a chain of schools, and part of that chain was actually a nursery kindergarten. And there was a rabbi that came in once a week named Rav Shachar, and he actually really connected extremely well with the children in addition to the regular kindergarten teachers. And it was an amazing experience. They had a Siddur program at the Kotel. It was just a fantastic way for him to just get right in and jump right in and learn about Israel, and then he was ready for first grade. So we knew we had to either come that year or the next year, because once you get past first grade, it gets a lot harder.
Wow, a lot of reasons. The stars aligned for you to come to Israel. It's amazing.
Just one thing was that we didn't want to say anything about making aliyah until we were 100% sure. A lot of people a year before, they always say, oh, we're planning on going next year, and then they can't get it together because it's not an easy thing to put the entire move together, especially when you're moving an entire home and 2 children and finding new jobs. So we actually didn't say anything to anybody until 2 weeks before we came, and we knew that everything was 100% set.
Wow. 2 weeks notice. Wow.
Okay, so another question: how did the people around you react?
They said, oh, next August? And I said, no, August, like next week.
That's the way to do it.
Nice.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow. Well, great job. I hope you're happy here.
Yeah, so now we're here 16 years, which is absolutely amazing. We had a third child while we've been here. His name is Yehuda Maccabi. He was born on Hanukkah and Rosh Chodesh at Har HaTzofim. And we had a view of the entire Jerusalem from the window. In the hospital, the midwife did Nagelwasser. She washed his hands in the traditional manner right after he was born. We never had any experiences like this before giving birth in the Bronx. It's totally different world. And he's a real Sabra. He's a real Sabra. I mean, when he speaks Hebrew, he sounds Israeli. When he speaks English, he sounds American. So he's the first Sabra in the whole family.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Okay. You want to tell us a little bit more about Torat Reva Yerushalayim?
Yeah. So when we first moved to Israel, we noticed that it's a very different community, because in America, you have a shul, you have a synagogue, and everything is centered on the synagogue. That's your Jewish community center, and all of the activities go on there. But in Israel, it's very different. You have shuls, you have synagogues, and people just go, chapa minyan. I'll go daven here in the morning, I'll go daven here in the afternoon. Some communities have more allegiance to a shul than others, but in Jerusalem, it's a lot more about just praying, maybe going on Shabbat, but you don't have that whole community feeling like you have outside. So if somebody's looking for a class, they would have to go to an institution and have the class there, which is great. There are a lot of adult education institutions for senior citizens that are active. There's there's a lot of Torah out here, and it's amazing. And you see active seniors, even in their 80s and 90s, going to study in Pardes or Matan. But you have the elderly that are in the nursing homes, in the assisted living residences, at the day centers, and they can't start going around looking for classes. So our view is to bring the classes into them, that they could be at their day center, and instead of having just music therapy and art therapy, they can also learn Torah. And these are the people that are really the founders of the state of Israel. Some were here before the state was established. Some have come over in all the various aliyahs. I mean, you have people there from Shushan Habira. You know, when you talk about Megillat Esther, 4 or 5 people raise their hand. Yeah, we are from there. We are from Persia. We are from the city that the Megillah takes place in. We have people that just came from Russia. We have people that came from France. We have people that came on all of the aliyahs since the beginning. So when you're in a room with all these people, everybody has a totally different take on the Torah. Also in Israel, in the early days, Tanakh, Bible study was much more focused on, even in the secular community. So you have a lot of Israelis that would consider themselves secular that know the Tanakh, know the Bible inside out. It's amazing. So when you go in and you give a class to these people, they will catch you. If you mention a midrash and you don't say that it's a midrash, they catch you right away. That is not in the Torah. That is a midrash. They will know. They know their stuff really, really well. But you know, they forget a lot of things. So it's really important for them to keep up with learning the parsha. It's really good for their mind. It's really good for their soul. And then so a lot of the classes we do are in Hebrew. But then there are also the English speakers that made aliyah, and they can't get out of their senior residences to go to a class somewhere else. But they can't also participate in the classes in their institution because they're all in Hebrew. So we come in and we do a class in English, you know, on women in Judaism or the Parsha, and this way they can participate and makes them feel a lot better that they can communicate with the other English speakers. I also speak French, so sometimes we'll have French speakers that will answer a question in French. We can do classes in French if there's a need. So we try to adapt to who's around. So that's one population. Another population is the mommy and me, which is mothers that are home with their newborn babies, and they want to learn Torah, they want to study Torah, but they can't bring the baby into a regular Torah study institution with people of all ages who don't have babies and don't want to hear a baby cry or don't feel comfortable if the mother decides to nurse in the middle of the class. And also the babies need room to spread around. It's very hard to bring a baby into Beit Midrash and have, you know, them play on the floor without people stepping on them or without them being near things that are dangerous or not clean. So we meet in different people's living rooms, and everybody has the chance to feed their baby, put their baby to sleep, let the babies play on the floor. And we started this really right after I made Aliyah, and some families have already had 4 babies go through the mommy and me process. I've been to bar and bat mitzvahs of babies that have grown up through the mommy and me. A lot of people have made good friends through this program. It's a great way for people to connect, and sometimes they'll even stay after the class. Some of the moms will make lunch, or people will just hang out together. But these are areas where there's no community normally that we're bringing in the community through Torah study. And the same with group homes and people with special needs, you know, to go into a special needs place that doesn't normally, you know, have a religious side to it, and do a Tu B'Shvat Seder for them, and get the students singing the Tu B'Shvat songs, calling up. We once had 10 different girls that want to come up and sing Hashkedi Porachat, the song for Tu B'Shvat, in the microphone. They just had such a great time. We brought the mascot from one of the sports teams. We just did all these fun things to really get these kids more interested in celebrating holidays on a level that they could relate to. And every community has to be dealt with in a different way. So it's just been great to meet all of these different populations, really get to know Israeli society, and bring a taste of the spirituality that we had in New York.
So you keep saying we. What's the program like built around? Who runs it? How many people do you have working for you?
Okay, so I'm the founder and director, so I teach a lot of the classes. My husband, Josh, he runs the business side. He also has other jobs, but he's really helped us put together, because he's an accountant, he helped us put together the nonprofit organization, both in the U.S., so we're tax deductible in the U.S., and also in Israel. So we're actually 2 separate organizations, one in the U.S. and one in Israel. And then we have teachers. We have Rabbi Alan Uter, who is an Ola from the United States. He teaches some of the classes. We also do a lot of community education where we bring in teachers and students from the local schools to do intergenerational activities with the elderly, which is also something that I did in Riverdale when I worked at the Hebrew Home for the Aged in Riverdale. We used to bring in kids from all the different schools, and it's the kids want to volunteer. We have bar and bat mitzvah kids that often want to volunteer, both Israeli bar and bat mitzvah kids and also kids from abroad that say, you know what, I want to celebrate my bar mitzvah in Israel or my bat mitzvah. One girl said, how does she want to celebrate? She wants to go into a nursing home and she wants to make sukkah decorations with the residents and hang it with them. That's what she wants to do. Not a ceremony, nothing. That is her bat mitzvah. Another student came from Connecticut. He just wanted to play the guitar for the residents of a nursing home. That was his whole bar mitzvah. And he prepared with his rabbi at home, he prepared Jewish songs on the guitar. He even prepared, he's from a non-Orthodox background. He didn't go to a day school. He prepared introductions to every song in Hebrew. Amazing to be able to introduce every song he was going to play on the guitar. And he wanted to do it right before Shabbat. So we picked a home that's like a 2-minute walk from my house. I cooked everything early, and literally an hour before Shabbat, I met them there and we did the whole Kabbalat Shabbat pre-Shabbat program before Shabbat came in, so we were able to use the guitar, and the people were just on cloud 9. So we just really try to bring in different types of volunteers to try to liven up the homes. And also we do a lot of programs with these soldiers that are protecting Jerusalem and Kever Rachel, Rachel's tomb. So we have volunteers abroad that come in and we make gift baskets for the soldiers, and then we deliver them together. And this is also a great way to connect kids and families that live in America or other countries with Israelis, because, you know, a lot of parents will just say, okay, in honor of your bar mitzvah, we'll send a check to Israel. But when the kid is actually fundraising and asking all of their friends and families to send contributions so that they could put baskets together, and then they come to Israel and we have all of the products ready, and they put them into the baskets, they wrap them up, they make the cards, and then we drive over to the checkpoints and they hand it to the soldiers, they feel so much more of a connection than if they just wrote a check. Of course, writing a check is great too, but when you can come and do it, that's something that they'll never forget.
Right.
There was one girl that actually crocheted Israeli flags for the soldiers protecting Kever Rachel, Rachel's tomb, and they hung it up. And when I came with another family, the flags were still hung up, and I took a picture and I sent it to the mom, and I said, you see how much they appreciate it? They had it hung up, and they still had tea bags from the last time we were there. So you could see that it means a lot.
That's really cool. It sounds very meaningful.
Okay, so if one of our listeners wants to do one of these programs, how can they find you?
So they can find me at toratreva.org, toratreva.org. Also, I'm on Facebook, Torat Reva Yerushalayim, so they're welcome. All my contact information is on both sites, and they can be in touch. Hopefully things will get better and people can actually come to Israel and we can do the projects together, or they can do a family fundraiser. If they can't come, we can still do it for them and take pictures, but we're hoping we'll get back to the days that we can really be in this together.
Yeah.
I send out a weekly Dvar Torah, a short sermon every week that connects the Parsha that we read in the synagogue with what's going on in Israel today. And I've been doing that for 16 years, which gets a little more challenging each year because you always want to find a connection, and every year, you have to find something new, but thank God I found enough new things. So I wrote 2 books. One was the first year of Divrei Torah, right from when I first moved here. And then 2 years ago, I wrote a second book, which has three short sermons for each parsha. For each of the weekly portions, there are 3 short sermons, and then people can read them at their Shabbat table, or they can join the email. Also, they can reach me either through Facebook or through the website. And they can receive the emails every week, and it's a nice little idea to share with your family, even if you didn't have time to prepare a speech on your own.
Wow.
And the idea is really to connect people so that when they get something from Israel every week, it strengthens their connection with Israel. I know a lot of Americans feel alienated from Israel. They don't feel that they have a connection with Israel. All they know about is the politics. They don't know about what goes on in day-to-day life. So it's really nice for them to see how things are really going, the current events that I write about, and the pictures that we have when we go with the soldiers or we go with the seniors. They see what life is like, and they see that things are happening here that have nothing to do with politics.
Yeah. So first of all, what you were saying before about how Americans feel alienated from Israel and how they only know the politics of it. One thing I don't think I don't think we say this enough on the podcast, Moshe. Tell me if you agree that Zionism is not just political. And Sharon, I think you can agree with me on this, based off what you were saying, that Zionism is not politics. Yes, there is the political side to it, but there's also just the beauty of the land and just supporting the Jews living in the country.
Exactly. People have to just, if you're going to read the New York Times, you're going to find the politics because that's what's in the newspaper. But when you know people that are in Israel, you really see what's going on during this whole time period from Purim until now. I've been doing a Zoom online class on the biblical importance of Israel and going through the different cities. The city of Shiloh, why this city is so important, what our connection is to it, what it's like today, just to get people to understand that the Bible really comes alive here. The Torah comes alive here, and this is what it's about. This is what it's about. It's not about the politics.
Right. In our first few episodes, we spoke about the history of Israel, and that was I guess more of the political side of it. But Moshe, maybe we should do episodes on the biblical side of it.
Sure, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah. So Sharona, you kept saying before, and when I spoke to you before recording, a big thing you kept saying is bringing the spirituality to Israel. So first of all, I want to know how you developed that slogan, I guess, and what you're doing to accomplish it, to bring the spirituality into the country.
So I think the real role model is somebody like Rabbi Riskin, who brought many members of his shul to Israel. He founded Efrat. He could have stayed in New York at Lincoln Square Synagogue and just been very happy there as a rabbi. But he said, no, I need to make a difference in Israel. And a lot of rabbis, I think, stay in their communities because they say, oh, we're needed in our communities. And I was the first female spiritual leader to work in a shul in America. And I could have said, okay, you know what? I'll stay at this shul or I'll go to another shul in another state. But I say, you know what? Israel needs our help too. Israel needs the spirituality. And it's missing. Unfortunately, it's missing. A lot of shuls, people keeping in for work. You go in, say the prayers as fast as you can and leave, right? And that's their connection. So I decided, for example, to represent people all over the world. And once a week, I go to the Kotel and I have what's called the Prayers at the Kotel campaign. And I daven, I pray on behalf of all of the people that need something, whether it's health or a shidduch or whatever it is. And people around the world make donations to help cover the cost for that. We also daven for people that we know that have been hurt in wars. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of wars since we got here. And what we did is every time we made sure to raise money to bring packages to every soldier that was hurt in the war. We would go to the hospitals all over the country. We would take down their names, and then we would daven, we would pray for all of them. And what's amazing is that we would then see in the newspaper stories, and we were familiar because we met either the soldier, we met their families if they were too sick to even take us in. We would read in the newspaper and say, oh my gosh, this soldier that was in an operation, we couldn't even meet with him, he's totally better. He's married, he has a kid, he has 2 kids, right? There's just amazing things that go on. So we connect both on the spiritual side, but also on the human side, right? To meet people, to connect them with Judaism, and then we sent back the names of all the people that they contributed for, so that people in America could also daven for them, and then we also gave them updates in that way. So through prayer, through Torah study, we also felt that the children, not only the Mommy and Me class, where the moms get to study Torah, but on Purim night, for example, right? People are in shul, people don't want to hear the babies crying, people don't want to see the little kids making noise in the middle of the Megillah, but Purim is the most exciting time for a kid, right? It's like a Jewish Halloween. How do you tell a kid, oh, you can't go to shul, your mom's going to go first, and then your dad's going to go to separate readings, and it ruins the entire holiday. So what we just decided to do was, we have friends that have a very large home, and they said that they're willing to have 70 to 100 people at a Megillah reading. And we have a friend that's an amazing Megillah reader. He reads really quickly, so he keeps everybody's attention. And everybody comes, the babies play on the floor.
Where I used to live, my neighbor also read it beautifully and
yeah.
just very quickly. It was amazing.
Really, so this guy's amazing, and the kids know that they're welcome, and nobody disturbs. It's amazing. We've been doing this for over 10 years, at least 12 years. Nobody disturbs. Everybody, all the kids they know they're welcome. Everybody's enjoying seeing them in their costume. We do a little party before where they have pizza and they're settled and they're not running around hungry. And we bring spirituality to people. And every year they say, wow, without you, we would have had to, split up the Megillah. We wouldn't have been able to take our kid. And it's the highlight for many, many people. Even when their kids are older, they still keep coming back because they like the sense of community, the sense of being welcome, the sense of inclusion that we have there. So we try to find the places that aren't being met, because yeah, sure, if you want to go to the Great Synagogue and hear cantors, that's already set up here. You want to go to Karl Bach Shul, that's set up here. But there are these other communities that are just not being served, and they also want that spirituality. And of course, again, now with Corona, it's difficult because we can't reach a lot of these populations right now due to the circumstances. But we're hoping that soon we'll be back, as soon as we can, that we'll be back in all of our regular scheduled.
God willing, yeah.
Because that's tough.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of our organization is we're not, online, that we are live with people, that we're one-on-one with people. But thank God for the Zoom, that we were able to connect through the Shiurim on Zoom with a lot of people that are really not usually stuck at home, but are stuck at home now due to the Corona. So they've become a whole other population that we never had before.
So speaking of Zoom, Zoom has limited time. So unfortunately, we do have to end this conversation. If any of our listeners wants to learn more about this, you can visit toratreva.org. That's TORATREVA.org.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
It was amazing having you. You can find all of our podcasts on our website, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts. You can learn more of any of our resources for this episode, for previous episodes, on the Learn More button. You can find our website at wzionism.com. Please leave a review or reply, share it, and you can also follow us on social media. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
And as I always say at the end of our episodes, stay safe and have a great day.